Just a moment, our host, Joseph Baker, will be joining us, along with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Joseph. He's a podcaster, event producer, writer, speaker, and audience builder. His passion is to help authors, speakers, and entrepreneurs build their audiences to monetize their leadership. Won't you please welcome our host, Joseph Baker.
Well, welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Compendium Podcast hosted by Leadership Books. My name is Joseph, and I am here today with our special guest, Richard Timmons. Richard is a lifetime lover of art, especially paintings of Jesus by the masters. In 1968, Richard married his high school sweetheart, Julie. They have 3 children and 1 foster son. They also have 12 grandchildren and 2 great-grandbabies. Richard's career started in the graphic arts industry and ended 45 years later when he sold his successful marketing firm. He opened a fine art gallery, which led to the opportunity to teach an art history class at a local college. It was Julie's idea to create a coffee table style book from all the research that was required to teach. Richard is honored to present to you this incredible story of Jesus through the eyes of 67 master artists and the sacred writings found in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Richard, what an incredible story. We're going to jump into that today, but welcome first to the Compendium Podcast.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited. I didn't realize you were going to share all that information.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm excited.
Yes, well, you have a great bio, so I felt like we had to read the whole thing and introduce you properly. So again, welcome to the podcast. And
thank you very much.
I look forward to asking you some questions and really digging in deep to this book. But before we get to the book, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? What are you up to these days? Give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, well, my wife and I live in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is the county of Bucks County near Philadelphia. Yeah, we've been residents of this community for about 35 years. So we're pretty much plugged in. Having the art gallery kind of made my wife and I a known couple in the community. So we always attended all the big community events and things like that. Our kids live in Texas, Portland, Oregon, and Florida. And I have 1 child nearby. So you can guess which child gets spoiled the most.
Yes, of course. Rewarded for being close to the parents.
For being close.
That's great. So we're going to dive into some of your work, but before we get to that, tell us something interesting, just personally. What do you do for fun?
That's a good question. You didn't prime me for this, but I'm just going to tell you one of the things I enjoy is coffee. So I'm not a snob, so don't get me wrong, but I do have an interest in espressos and cappuccinos because my wife likes cappuccinos. So I just had a friend over who brought some new coffee to test, and so we're doing a coffee test tasting before we talked.
Oh, nice.
Besides that, I'm a prolific reader. I play guitar. We do a little traveling. We haven't traveled as much as we used to.
Oh, nice.
And my wife and I like to cook together.
That is great. Those are some great hobbies, and also that means that you should be well caffeinated for today's interview. So that's really good.
Juiced up.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book today. Your book, I'm just going to read the bio here because I believe it does it justice. So your book is called Come Meet Jesus. This is a 154-page inspirational coffee table book featuring 67 paintings chronicling the life of Christ, along with scripture from the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The greatest story ever told about the greatest person that ever lived through the eyes of some of the world's greatest artists. This makes a great gift for anyone interested in art history, the life of Christ, or as a unique way to share the gospel. So we're going to talk a lot about this book. I've actually seen a PDF copy of this book. I've had a little bit of a preview of it. What is the backstory behind this book?
Thanks for asking me that question. The backstory actually is a 54-year story. It's not going to take 54 years to tell this story. But you did share a lot of the information. But what you need to know is I married my high school sweetheart at the age of 19. And I had two goals in life when I was 16 years old. One was I wanted to marry the prettiest girl in the neighborhood, which I did. And then the second goal was I wanted to be filthy rich, because my wife and I came from blue collar workers, and we always had this picture of being rich was important. Both of those dreams, marrying the prettiest girl in the neighborhood and then getting rich, actually did happen. The story of us getting rich is really important to this book because it takes us down this road, a journey that my wife and I had no idea that we were going to be on. We actually bought a house when we were 21, and we actually built an addition on the house. And I was working in a design firm, and I was actually involved with meetings that were talking about items like computers. And back in those days, nobody really knew anything about computers. That's how far back this goes. But I came home one day and I asked my wife, Julie, if I'd like to sell the house and buy a computer. And she said to me, "What's a computer?" And I said to her, honestly, I don't know, but I believe it's going to change the world. And it did. It changed the world. The computer we bought was the size of a refrigerator. We sold our house, bought the computer, started a little graphic arts business because that was my background. And within 4 years, we were really, really financially like in the green. I mean, like going from an inner city row home to a single home, swimming pool, sports car, motor home, the whole bit. And we thought we arrived. Well, the problem with that is that I had no idea how fast you can get in trouble with money. And very quickly, my business, I was running to the ground. And actually on Good Friday, I had 8 employees walk out on me on a Good Friday all at once. And it was at that moment when I realized that I was in trouble because I was just doing a lot of improper, incorrect things in running a business. My lifestyle was all off. And I can remember it like yesterday. I remember crying, and I remember saying, "God, if you exist, I need help." And that following Tuesday, a gentleman came looking for a job, and I hired him. And we worked together for about 7 weeks, and well, longer than that. But by the 7th week, it was when every time we would be together, we would talk about Jesus. And I really didn't know that much about Jesus before. And then the more he shared with me about Jesus, the more my heart started to change. I wanted to be a different man. I didn't want to be the man I used to be. And so I had what we call in circles, and sometimes people don't get it, but that what we call is a born again experience. And I actually recall the very day that I asked Jesus to come into my life. That moment in history is when my life actually really began to make sense. My life changed. Everything about us changed. And so we rebooted our business and we restarted our business under some new principles. And again, our business flourished. And we were now 45 years later, somebody wanted to buy our business. And so we sold our business. And it was a great business. It was very successful, but we just felt it was time to sell. Changes were taking place in the industry that I didn't feel comfortable continuing to grow in. Sold the business. And the people that bought the business didn't want to stay in the building that we were in. We own a barn, 1840 barn, right in the center of Doylestown, historic, well placed for any business to run, but they decided to move. Now, this is where it gets really crazy because I never, ever thought that I would be an art gallery curator. We opened up an art gallery, and the art gallery was successful. It was just crazy. We were just amazed. I wouldn't recommend doing an art gallery to put children through college.
Sure.
But But for us, it was successful. Our children were grown up. We would have these events on a Friday evening. That's the classic. People come in and they look at art, they listen to music, have a glass of wine. Unbeknownst to us, people from the local college were coming in to check us out. And one evening, the two people came up to my wife and I and asked if I would be interested in teaching art history at college. Again, never ever part of my plan. So this is where I think it kind of gets interesting. We agreed that we would teach, but I said to them that I would like to do, now this is a secular college, and it is what they call a continuing arts program. So I said to them, I would like to teach art history, but I would like to teach art history through all the great artists that painted one person. And I said Napoleon would be maybe, but I can only find 7 paintings of Napoleon. But I do study the life of Christ in art, actually. And I suggested that we do a study on the life of Christ. And they said yes. And I thought that they would probably say no, but they did say yes. And I taught art history at the local college, which was kind of a blast. Now, so I did that for several years. We ran the gallery, but this is where it gets a little complicated. And that is that I have a son who was a professional horse trainer in Dallas. And he and I, very close, good buddies. I got a phone call from him one day telling me that he was having pounding headaches. He was at a show, a horse show, pounding headaches. And on Monday, he was going to the hospital. We were not prepared for what came next. No family is. My son turned out to have brain cancer. And from that brain cancer, we decided to shut the gallery down, decided to stop painting or stop teaching, and that we would spend most of our time with our son in Dallas because the type of brain cancer he has is called glioblastoma, and that is uncurable. So for the next 18 months, we spent a lot of time with his family, 6 children, in a suburban community of Dallas, and we lost our son to glioblastoma cancer 18 months later, exactly the way the doctor said it would happen. Nobody can explain it. The pain of it is brutal. Yet, by the grace of God, we had to trust. If we believe in God, then we have to believe that He has a plan or a purpose for that. Painful, we still are painful. But this is what I think happened because I did all this preparation for teaching. I did not go back to teaching. I did not go back to the gallery, and we actually just kind of shut our lives down. And about 3 or 4 months later, it was my wife who said to me, you really need to get back to doing something. And she said, why not take the artwork that you've been, putting together for classes? Why not consider making a coffee table book out of it? Never thought I would teach. Never did I think that my son would ever come down with cancer. And never did I think that I would produce a book of this nature. So the backstory is that sometimes in life, there's just a lot of crazy things happen. And, we never planned the book. We never planned to teach. We never planned the art gallery. And yet here we are today with a tiger of a book by the tail, and we're pretty excited about where we are now.
Wow. That is a powerful story and very, very, very personal.
Yes,
very personal. And that's, I also commend you for taking that time with your son and stopping other things that were pulling for your time. I mean, it was probably an obvious decision to you, but that's, it's interesting how when health problems come at your family, everything stops. The world sort of screeches to a halt.
Yep.
And
everything stops.
Yeah.
You start to realize that what's really important is family.
Yeah.
And for us, though, I have to say we really had a great family relationship. My son and I were very close. We did a lot of business together. We rode together. taught them how to hunt, taught them how to fish, taught, and all those great men and boy things. So we were close. And yet we were able to work through the loss of him in a really gracious, spiritual way, I think, that was honoring. I have no idea what people would feel or what they would go through with the Lord in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really what makes it, I think, different. We still, I find my wife crying almost every morning over her coffee. It's it's a loss. It's a child. Parents never want to lose a child.
So in your book, Come Meet Jesus, we've talked a little bit about the backstory. We've talked about what you were going through in your life. We've talked about the art gallery and your businesses. But how did you really put this book together? You have so many artists. How did you find them? How did you even start that process of putting that book together?
Well, in light of the fact that we were doing the research for the college courses that I was teaching, at least I had a source of knowing where to go and how to find images. Part of the problem, though, is anything that you find online, they're all low res, 72 TPI, and that's not acceptable for high quality printing. And I come out of the background of annual report design for Fortune 500 companies. So I'm classically a book designer, writer. And so I had to find an organization, and there's what they call stock photo houses, all in the industry, that actually travel around the world, hiring photographers to photograph paintings in museums, in churches, in places. And I actually was able to find that organization by happenstance, just research. And so I was able to put together a package, if you will, of being able to research their entire platform of paintings and then pick from those paintings the best of the best.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very cool. And how did you go about the process of actually printing the book and publishing it? What was that like?
Well, that's basically a lot of my back experience from my 45 years in the marketing world. And so like I said, I am, and I guess I will be for the rest of my life, somewhat of a designer. But I knew people in the industry. I know what quality paper is. I know what quality printing is. And I actually I had several people on staff with me, but I actually brought on one of my longtime right-hand assistants. And between she and I, we cobbled together, I did most of the art research and then cobbled together a design that we were comfortable with. We wanted the scriptures to be in it to support the painting. By the way, that's really an important aspect of this book. The paintings by these great artists, all these great artists painted Jesus, by the way. There's more paintings, more books, more songs, more poetry about Jesus than any other person in the world. When you Google Jesus, you come up with some 670 million hits on Jesus. And so now the question is, why would anybody want to do another book on Jesus? Well, the reason we wanted to do this is that this is the first book that we've found that's actually chronological. Most books about Jesus, and I've got books and books behind me, they all have paintings of Jesus, but there's no rhyme or reason. They just, they go into the bronzes and they go into the sculptures and they go into all different things, but they don't linearly, horizontally, chronologically tell the story of Jesus. And so as I was teaching in order. And so when we realized that was probably the most important part, so that you can take this book and take a young child, tell the story of Jesus from beginning to end in order. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Book of Acts, they all have the story. It's integrated, but what happens is when you try to look at all four Gospels, it doesn't necessarily weave in exact order that you would put it in. So part of the project was actually figuring out which came first, did Jesus walk on the water before the storm or after the storm? And so that was a lot of the work that my wife and I did.
Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah, and by the way, these artists that are in this book are without a doubt probably the best artists throughout history. The only one that's missing is Michelangelo, not necessarily intentionally, but a lot of Michelangelo's work was more in three-dimensional, other than the Last Supper, or that was Da Vinci. I'm sorry, Da Vinci, that the painting of the Last Supper of Da Vinci is not in this book, because the painting of Da Vinci was all deteriorated. It was painted on concrete, and it was what they call a fresco. And so over the years, it's been repainted, repainted, repainted. And so I kind of felt that it wasn't really the original. So we used another painting by the artist Peter Paul Rubens. Interesting story about Peter Paul Rubens is that he painted over cataloged masterpieces, 1,400, over 1,400 masterpieces. Of those 1,400 masterpieces, 407 of them were of Jesus. So you have to ask yourself what was going on in Peter Paul's head. Where was he spiritually, so to speak? Same way with Rembrandt. Rembrandt spent many of his years looking for the face of Christ. So he would spend a lot of his time in the Jewish quarters, looking for the face of Christ. And so he'd paint all these Jewish men that were 30. And so there's several artists in this book that painted prolifically, dedicated their lives to painting Jesus.
Wow, that's very powerful. Yeah. That's very powerful. So when we actually release this video version of the podcast, I will include a few pictures here of your paintings that are in the book, so that we can show that to at least the viewing audience.
Yeah, that would be great, because I wanted to, I was hoping that we could do that. May I tell a quick story?
Yeah.
There's a painting in there by Rembrandt, which is Calming the Storm. This is the story of when they all go out in the boat and Jesus falls asleep in the boat, and then a storm rises and the storm is like out of control. And then Jesus ultimately, calms the storm. But in the painting of Rembrandt is, you can see the boats really tipping and really, really scary part. Everybody is working, and and so you just see like the backs of heads or the sides of heads, but there's one person who actually turns and looks like at the camera, and like he's like he's afraid. That's a self-portrait of Rembrandt. So Rembrandt painted himself into the painting, and then in 1990, in March of 1990, at a gallery up in Boston, that painting was cut out of the frame and stolen. And so that painting, that mystery, that theft still has never been solved. And so the gallery owners keep the frame right where it was, hanging with no painting in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so the name of the gallery is the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum. And so that is kind of like an interesting story. It was a gigantic painting, and someone came in, they were dressed as police officers, stole the painting, cut it out, and it has never been solved since. So I like backstories like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of fun.
So for those in our audience who are listening and watching today, and they are hearing all these stories, they're putting these images in their mind as much as they can imagine them, but they want to see them. Where would we go to actually get our hands on this book?
Well, you can go to the publishing company that's representing me right now is Leadership Publishing. And at Leadership Publishing, you can then dial in Come Meet Jesus. And the book is available through Leadership Publishing.
That's great. Yep. And just so everybody knows, you can find that at leadershipbooks.com. And you also have a personal website. What's your, how do people find you personally?
Yeah, that's good, because on my personal website, I write about Jesus probably 3 times a week. And so I include another painting by another artist and kind of like tell a story or do a devotional about that particular painting. So the website is Come www.comemeetjesus.art, A-R-T. So it's www.comemeetjesus.art.
Excellent.
Good.
That's great.
Thank you.
Well, Richard, I want to thank you for being a guest today on the Compendium Podcast, and also I just want to thank you for your work in this. This is a holy work. This is a life's work. It feels like a lot of what you were doing in business and in life was leading to this moment of something that's going to be passed down to generations. Imagine your great grandchildren opening this book someday, right? And hearing the stories of how it came together. This is a very powerful work.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly right, by the way. We look at this as our legacy project. We're getting up there in years. And we do have a couple other books that we're working on, but this is an incredible ride.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all of our watchers and our listeners today. You can visit Richard's website, www.comemeetjesus.art. You can also find his book at leadershipbooks.com. Thank you to all of you who have participated today. Thank you, Richard. And we will catch you all in the next episode of the Compendium Podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium Podcast.